All right. Welcome, everybody. I got some notes here, and I might be reading them too much, but my name is John Ford, and I'm going to tell you a little bit what I know about a genre of music called the blues. When you think of blues, you think of misfortune and lost my woman, lost my man, lost my job kind of thing. But the blues can also be about overcoming hard luck and saying what you feel and ridding yourself of frustration and simply having fun. And that last one is a big one. I mean, the blues is a lot of fun. I have to say that I have a lot of stories in my head, and none of them are written down, and so I'll probably go off on a lot of tangents. But that's, in the Delta where, northwest Mississippi, where the blues started, those people were mostly sharecroppers, and if you worked 14 hours in the fields all day, 5-6 days a week, you were ready to have some fun, and you went into town, or you went to on Saturday night, you went to a local house party or something, and you had as much fun as you could have. You knew you had to go back to work Monday morning and pick cotton or whatever. Let's see. Deeply rooted in American history, particularly African American history, the blues is generally, or what we know as the blues, came to be in the mid to late 1800s. No one really knows for sure because it wasn't written down or wasn't recorded in any way. It was just word of mouth, and people seeing other people sing or play the blues, and that's the way it was passed down. And that's the way like most folk music was passed down. And that's why people like Alan Lomax and John Lomax worked for the copyright or Library of Congress. They would go out and they would record, people singing old folk songs, go down to the South or in West Virginia somewhere and record people singing old folk songs because they were trying to preserve that and trying to record that some way, and that's why they did that. Let's see. Some aspects of the blues you can trace back to Africa and maybe Europe. I won't get into that, but the blues, in my opinion, is, it is black. It came out of the black experience, the slave experience, the Southern experience, the Jim Crow laws, and all of that, and the sharecroppers experience. And I guess I'll tell the story of, I read Mississippi John Hurt, if you've ever heard of him. He recorded back in the 20s, and he was part of the revival, the blues and folk revival that came about in the early 60s, where they went and found all these old blues guys that were still alive, and they brought them to college campuses and places like the Newport Folk Festival and let them play, and they kind of got a second career, by folks doing that. And Mississippi John Hurt was one of those blues guys, and I read his biography, and to give you a little insight of the sharecropper experience. If you don't know, you probably already know, but John Hurt's son, and I don't even know his name, but this was a story that his daughter told John Hurt's granddaughter. Her name's Mary Hurt, and they still hold a festival down in Mississippi every year on Labor Day weekend, and she still attends down there where John Hurt's house was. Anyway, when she was a little girl, she said she remembered one Christmas, or at the end of the year, they would come around, the guy that owned the land would come around and pay, you know, the sharecroppers, if they owed him anything, they would pay him. And it said her daddy was, you know, looking for the man to come every, yeah, come on in. Looking for the man to come to pay him, you know, at the end of the year, maybe he'd make some money, but, and a lot of times, as in this case, the guy shows up and he said, man, you worked really hard and you almost made some money, but not quite. And you know, so there was no money at Christmas, and so that's what the sharecroppers had to deal with a lot of times. Let's see. The blues incorporates or comes from church hymns and work songs and field hollers and African chants and country dance music, and it's just, you know, a mixed bag of influences. And work, everybody knows, hopefully, what a work song is. It's when you're working and the guys, especially on the chain gangs, and I've seen videos of they'd have a chain gang, and you know, those guys would be out there working and chopping, and they would sing a song that would go with what they were doing if they were, you know, hitting the railroad spike or whatever, you know. And then field hollers, I can't do one, but field hollers, if you ever listen to Sonny Terry, the old harmonica player, he could do a good field holler, and it's just making a noise as high as you can, as loud as you can, basically, is how I can describe it. The most distinctive thing about the blues, melody-wise, I'll grab this, is the flattening of the third note and the seventh note. And at that time, back when, that was revolutionary. So that's a major E chord. The third note of the E chord is the G sharp. So if you're singing a melody like this, it's like da 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 da, like that, you know, like you would think of more of a European influence. But the blues went and took that note and flattened it to where the melody would go like. So instead of you would. So that's the third note, and then the seventh note is the D in the E chord. It's that note. And if you flatten that, it's like. So that was the big secret to the blues, I guess. Let me see. So let's see. So when I'm jumping forward a little bit, but when W.C. Handy, who was a band leader around the turn of the last century, heard the blues, he described it as a haunting music, and he incorporated it into his compositions, and he was one of the first to record the blues, but it was in a big band kind of situation. And I think that was the first recorded blues, and I think before that, before they recorded the blues, it was probably played, one of the early bands was called the Mississippi Sheiks, and they played it in a band which consisted of guitar, violin, banjo, mandolin, and clarinet. So bands like that, and then just solo guys, mostly, you know, just on guitar or banjo, were probably the first people to play the blues. Now let's see, let me get this. I wanted to play you a little bit of the W.C. Handy stuff here. Get it going. This is a song called the St. Louis Blues, and this was recorded in 1914. There it is. So you hear that, da, 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 da. That's the flattening of the third note, da, 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 like that. So let me tell you about W.C. Handy. He was born in Florence, Alabama, I think in the 1870s. I can't remember which particular year. But he became a teacher. He taught at a college, and he was playing in bands, like minstrel bands, when he was young. And he traveled through Mississippi a lot. And let's see, in 1903, I think it was, yeah, 1903, he became the director of a black band organized by the Knights of Pythias in Clarksdale, Mississippi. Clarksdale is ground zero for blues. It's in the Delta. Just about every blues guy you've heard of is either from Clarksdale or within 50 miles of Clarksdale. And so Handy lived there at the time. And in 1903, while waiting for a train in Tutwiler, Mississippi, which is, I think, about 15 minutes outside of Clarksdale, little town. It's got a I was just there back in January, and it's a little town. I mean, it's got a gas station and that's about it, you know. And he was waiting for a train there, and he fell asleep. It was late at night, and he fell asleep. And he woke up, and the guy was playing guitar next to him, you know, sitting at the depot. And I'll read to you how he described it. He described the guy as a lean, loose-jointed Negro. And he had commenced plunking on a guitar beside me while I slept. As he played, he pressed the knife on the strings of the guitar in a manner popularized by Hawaiian guitarists who used steel bars instead of the knife. The singer repeated the line 3 times, accompanying himself on guitar with the weirdest music I have ever heard. And so that's the first time W.C. Handy heard the blues. And in 1905, he was playing a dance in Cleveland, Mississippi, which is right down there in the Delta. Handy was given a note and asked for our native music. Well, he played an old-time Southern melody, but he was asked if a black band could come up and play a few numbers. And then three young men with a battered guitar and mandolin and a worn-out bass walked on stage. And this is what he said about that. He said, they struck up one of those over and over strains that seemed to have no beginning and certainly no end at all. The strumming attained a disturbing monotony, but on and on it went, a kind of stuff associated with sugarcane rows and levee camps. Thump, thump, thump went their feet on the floor, and it was not really annoying or unpleasant, perhaps haunting is a better word. So he uses that word, haunting. And what he's describing is what they call hill country blues. I'll play a little bit of that. So hill country blues is a lot of times just one chord, and they just go on like he said. This is a song that R.L. Burnside did, and there's video of R.L. Burnside doing this song. He's out in the field and he's sitting on a 5-gallon bucket. And he's playing this $20 guitar through probably a $30 amp, but I thought this was the best version I ever heard. It's a song called "Poor Boy Long Way From Home." It goes like, well, I'm a poor boy and I'm a long way from home. Yeah. Well, I'm a poor boy and I'm a long way from home. Well, can't do me, do, 'cause I'm a poor boy and I'm a long way from home. 'Cause I'm a poor boy and I'm a long way from home. Yeah. Well, baby, I can't stand alone. Well, baby, I can't stand alone. Well, can't do me no harm, 'cause I'm a poor boy, I'm a long way from home. 'Cause I'm a poor boy, and I'm a long way from home. Sometimes they would just go into other songs to keep the people dancing, you know. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go down to New Orleans. You know I love you so, baby, please don't go. Well, I feel dark. Well, I feel dark, yeah. Well, I feel dark. Get your way down here, make your father go. Please don't go, yeah, yeah. You man don't go, you know your man don't go, you know your man don't go down the county farm, got the shackles on, baby, he don't go, yeah. Black Betty, bam bam, oh black Betty, bam bam, black Betty, the baby, bam bam, but the thing we crazy, bam bam, oh black Betty, bam bam, oh black Betty, bam bam, black Betty, the child, bam bam, but the thing we wild, bam bam, but the thing we blind, bam bam, bam bam, oh black Betty, bam bam, oh black Betty. Bam, bam, jump steady, black Betty. Bam, bam, jump around, black Betty. Bam, bam, jump steady, black Betty. Bam, bam, jump around, black Betty. Bam, bam, yeah. My baby, she's dead and gone. My baby, she's dead and gone. Mom can't do me no harm, 'cause I'm a poor boy and I'm a long way from home. Poor boy and I'm a long way from home. 'Cause I'm a poor boy and I'm a long way from home. Poor boy a long way from home. Thank you. So that's what he's talking about. Kind of a hill country, monotonous, keeps on going, but you can stomp your feet to it and you can dance to it for a good 20, 30 minutes if you need to, you know.
You wear out.
Yeah, until you got enough fun, you know, had enough fun. All right, let's see. Play another clip. So he first heard the blues turn of the century, 1903. Takes him to 1914 to record his version of the blues, which is kind of a big band, almost vaudevillian kind of sound. And let me see. And then let's see, 1920. I'll play this other one, but I got to bring it up. 1920, we have a lady by the name of Mamie Smith that comes and records a blues vocal. I'll let you hear a little bit of this. Again, it sounds very vaudevillian. Mamie Smith, so that's considered the first recorded vocal blues. That's 1920. And then 1925, you got people like Blind Lemon Jefferson. Let's see. Blind Lemon Jefferson from Texas. Let me get my devices together here. So Blind Lemon comes in and he records stuff that is kind of taken off of ragtime piano. A lot of that early blues sounds like ragtime. It's just like kind of like this. Stuff like that. And then, so we'll say that's 1927, Mississippi Sheiks record a song called Sitting on Top of the World. Mississippi Sheiks was a band of brothers. It was Lonnie Chapman, Sam Chapman, and a guy named Armature Chapman, and he changed his name to Bo Carter. And they had a couple other guys with him named, I wrote it down, I forget. I got to get this right, because I've been trying to remember this guy's name for a while. Let's see. Yeah, I forget where I wrote it now. Yeah, I forget where I wrote it. Oh, there it is. Lonnie Sam and Walter Vincent and Papa Charlie McCoy were the other people in the band. And they did songs like this. Old song, this song's been recorded by everybody, from Frank Sinatra to the Grateful Dead. Mississippi been broken, so deep and wide. And the one that loves me is on the other side. And now she's gone, and I don't worry. sitting on top of the world. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. Quarter to them. All right. 1928 came along. A guy named Blind Willie McTell. He lived in Statesboro, and if you go down to Statesboro, which I did a couple summers ago, City Hall is an old hotel. That's where Blind Willie McTell used to play at that old hotel. He'd play out on the veranda and he'd play in the courtyard. When the tobacco growers came into town, he would go there because he knew there was a lot of money, floating around. And so if you go to Statesboro now, the City Hall is in that old hotel. And I walked in there and I said, did this used to be the Jaco Hotel? And the young girl sitting at the counter, yeah. I said, did Blind Willie McTell used to play here? She said, who's that? I said, well, he's an old blues player. And so I took a few pictures and left. He used to do songs like this. You might recognize this song. Statesboro Blues. Well, let's see what time we got here. Well, it's already getting late. I'll have to skip a few. I kind of tried to time this out today, and I know I had way too much material. We'll skip to let's do a song from 1929. Obviously, I know a lot of these late 20s songs. This is a song, this is a Charlie Patton song. Charlie Patton was one of the most influential blues singers, players in the Delta. Everybody that was from there had either learned from Charlie Patton or had played with him at some point. Very interesting character. They said he had the loudest voice, and by the time he was, recording in the late 20s, his voice was pretty much gravel. If you ever hear recordings, mine's getting that way too, but if you've ever heard recordings of Charlie Patton, he just sounds like this. And they said you could hear him from 500 yards away. He could project that voice, and a lot of those guys kind of sang that way because that you had to sing like that to kind of project that voice out because there was no amplifiers back in the late 20s and 30s.
How do you spell it? E-N or O-N?
Patton. O-N.
O-N?
Like the general. Charlie Patton. Now, Sam Chapman of the Mississippi Sheiks says that Charlie Patton was his half-brother. And who knows? Who really knows? Charlie Patton was a red-headed black man. And all those guys, Sam Chapman was, he was like 1/4 Cherokee and Irish and black and yeah. Well, they said his daddy had 60 children, 60 in the Delta. Anyway, this is a song called Paulie Blues. This was actually recorded in 1929 in Richmond, Indiana. We'll get into that. It's out my pony, settled in my black man. It's out my pony, settled in my black man. Get me a rider out in this world somewhere. I'm lost central, come back with your line. Hello central, come back with your line. Cobblestone last night, tore the wire down. Sunday pony, being on red train. Yes, sir. Sunday pony, being on red train. Get in the saddle, tighten up your rein. Like scared away, like some victory. Like scared away, like some victory. Like scared woman, won't you come dance with me? Nothing to tell you when I got to change. Something to tell you when I got to change. Don't want to marry, want to be your man. Yeah. Paulie Blues, everyone. I figure out how to do a slide, play some slide. And then this is what W.C. Handy was talking about when the guy was pressing a knife against the strings, make it sound like the Hawaiian players, he said. I do this song. This is a Robert Johnson song, actually, but it's a song that I do a different version of. I do more or less the Johnny Lee Hooker version. So, well, you see what it sounds like anyway. The song's called Terraplane Blues. I've been driving my terraplane. Little girl says I've been gone. I've been driving my terraplane. Little girl says I've been gone. I've lost my lights. My horn won't even blow. Bet you could, bet you could, bet you could. Gotta check your wall this morning. Bet you could, lift up your hood. Gotta check your wall this morning. Seems like you got a loose connection. Way down low. Good little car, baby. She's driving every day. A good little car, woman. She's driving night and day. Got a good little car, baby. But it won't last long the way you drag. Terraplane Blues. All right, Charlie Patton. We'll go to Son House. A guy named Son House. Eddie House was his real name. They called him Son House.
Tell us a little bit more about that unusual guitar.
Oh, that is a resonator guitar. It's called a resonator, made out of I think a lot of them are made out of nickel. I think that was just made out of steel. It was made, I don't know exactly what year they started making them, but obviously they made them because they were loud guitars. And they were louder than any other guitar at the time before amplification. So most of the old guys had those, or a lot of the old guys had them, like Son House. Son Eddie House, let's see, he was from Clarksdale, kind of went between preaching and playing the blues. A lot of those guys did. I mean, they made a living preaching some, and then they get out of favor with the church and start playing the blues, and they go back to preaching. Son House kind of did that, and I forget, in the 40s, he played around Mississippi, from Mississippi. He got sent to prison for killing a man and spent about 6 months or a year in prison, where a lot of those guys did, and you could get out of prison fairly easily by having your boss say that he needed you on the farm. If a black man killed another black man, then they sent you to prison, but all it took to get out a lot of times was your boss calling the warden and saying, I need that man for, to work in my field. I'm I'm not getting my work done. I need him. So they'd get back out and they'd tell him, you know, you got to go back to work. But anyway, he spent some time in a parchment farm down there, and he left the Delta in the 40s and relocated to Rochester, New York, started working for the railroad. And then they found him up there in the early 60s and you know, brought him back like a lot of those old guys, brought him back, and they had a second career playing for all the folk festivals and stuff. But Son House at that time when they found him, they said he was an alcoholic, and you had to give him those little airplane bottles of liquor. And if you gave him one, he could remember the lyrics. And if you gave him 2 bottles, he'd forget all the lyrics and couldn't play. So you had to give him just the right amount of liquor. And he'd start feeling good, and he'd start playing, and then he'd start preaching in the middle. There's a video of him playing somewhere, and he's got to do his sermon before he plays the song. And he did this song, I do this song. He would do this song a cappella. He'd just clap his hands and start singing this. This is an old spiritual tune called John the Revelator. Tell me who's that riding? John the Revelator, tell me who's that riding? John the Revelator, tell me who's that riding? John the Revelator brought the book of the 7 seals. Down, God walked down in the cool of the day. He called out about his name. But he refused to answer, 'cause he was naked and ashamed. Tell me who's that right? John the Revelator, tell me who's that right? John the Revelator, tell me who's that right? John the Revelator wrote the book of the 7 seals. Down Christ out 12 apostles, dead and 3 legged away. He said, watch before now, Bible down, go yonder and pray. Tell me who's that right? John the Revelator, tell me who's that right? John the Revelator, tell me who's that right? John the Revelator wrote the book of the 7 seals. Down crossroads early on Easter morning, Mother Mary went down to see. He said, tell my 12 apostles to meet me in Galilee. Tell me who's that right? John the Revelator, tell me who's that right? John the Revelator, tell me who's that right? John the Revelator wrote the book of the 7 seals. Tell me who's that right? John the Revelator, tell me who's that right? John the Revelator, tell me who's that right? John the Revelator wrote the book of the 7 seals. Wrote the book of the 7 seals. That Well, we're running out of time. Let's see, I got to condense some of this stuff then. Son House, when he was playing in the Delta, he played with a guy named Willie Brown a lot. Willie Brown was the same character mentioned in Robert Johnson's song Crossroads, last verse. His poor friend Willie Brown. Well, Robert Johnson was like a teenager when those guys were playing. Robert would go, and when those guys would take a break, Robert would take their guitar. They'd go outside and smoke, and Robert would grab their guitar and start banging on it and try to play. And people would come outside of the establishment and say, "You got to get back in there, Little Robert." They call him Little Robert. Little Robert's in there making such a racket, driving everybody out. You know. So they go in and get the guitar away from him. And so Robert Johnson, he's in the Delta, and he goes down to find his father in Hazelhurst, Mississippi, which is just below Jackson, southern Mississippi. He goes down to find his father. And while he's down there, he's gone from the Delta for a period of time, 6 months, 2 years, nobody can really say. And pretty much what's understood is he's down there trying to find his father. He runs into a guy named Ike Zinnerman. Ike Zinnerman's down there, he's a guitar player, and Ike takes him in. Ike lives in Beauregard, Mississippi. Takes him in, and Robert Johnson lives with Ike Zinnerman for a period of time, and he teaches him how to play guitar better than he could. And so Robert, down there, they said he used to practice all night in the cemetery. He'd go across the street, practice in the cemetery all night long. And he got pretty good, because when he went back to the Delta, he walked into a place, Son House and Willie Brown were playing, and he said, "Look at what I can do." And he played a number, and their jaw hit the floor because they couldn't believe how good he had become. And so started the rumor that he had sold his soul to the devil in order to play that well. And what really happened, I believe, he was down in Beauregard, and I've been down to Beauregard. It's been about 4 years. I went down and to try to find where Ike Zinnerman lived. He lived on a road called East Avenue in Beauregard, and it's a short road, and there is only one cemetery across the road, and it's the Beauregard Cemetery. And I went there and visited that place. I figured that's got to be where Robert Johnson practiced. So he comes back to the Delta, and he's like better than anybody. Records in 1936 and goes to San Antonio, Texas, and records his first recording sessions in November 1936. Goes to San Antonio, and he goes to a hotel called the Gunther Hotel, and he's there for a week, November 23rd to November 27th, 1936. And he's recording all week, and I happen to find out this information, and you can go on the internet and find out anything these days, but he recorded in room 414 of the hotel, and the hotel's still there, and room 414 is still there. John Mellencamp, the guitar player from Indiana, or the artist, or whatever you call him, musician from Indiana, he gave me the idea, because he went there and took an old tape recorder and recorded himself in that room, and I thought, well, it sounds like a cool thing to do. So in 2012, I went down there and recorded, 5 songs that I've got on one of my albums here. It's called Songs from Room 414. Here's one of the songs. I should do this one, I guess, that he recorded. He recorded this on a Friday, November 27, 1936. sweet pool bow if you please. Down to the crossroads, to fly you back. Yeah. Down to the crossroads, to fly you back. Nobody seems to do me now. Everybody just passed me by. The sun going down, boy, so hang on to catch me. Yeah. The sun going down, boy, so hang on to catch me. Yeah. Well, I ain't got no sweet brother, don't know. Loving girl. That's all. To my friend poor Willie Brown. Ooh, but you can run to my friend poor Willie Brown. Go down to the crossroads, yeah. Please, I'm singing down. Crossroad Blues. Well,
maybe one more song and then
I was going to say,
question or two.
okay. Well, just let me run through what I didn't get to, and that was, we stopped at Robert Johnson. I have to do a part two, I guess. Muddy Waters, McKinley Morganfield was his name. They called him Muddy. And then when he recorded, they added the name Waters after it. He was the one that made it from the Delta up to Chicago, made it out of Mississippi, one of the first ones in 1943. Moved to Chicago, and the rest is history. I mean, he became one of the most famous, well-known blues players. Johnny Lee Hooker was doing the same thing in Detroit. 1948 was a big year. Muddy came out with a song called "Can't Be Satisfied." You know that was very controversial. You know, black man singing "Can't Be Satisfied" on. You can't play that on the radio. You know, in 1948. Johnny Lee Hooker doing a song called "Boogie Chillin'," as they write it. In 1948, and I have to make this side note, in 1948 in Cincinnati, what was happening was not necessarily in the blues, but I have to mention Hank Williams was recording down at Herzog Studios on Race Street, December of 1948. So that was all going on. That was a big year. Howlin' Wolf comes to Chicago in 1952. Howlin' Wolf, they called him. His real name was Chester Burnett. He was probably, I mean, you go see like rock and roll shows, you used to, and you know, all the stage antics. Howlin' Wolf was one of those that really got that thing going. Man, on stage, he was just dynamite. He did stuff like climbing up the curtains, singing, and holding on to the curtains with one hand. He, one of the folk festivals, he spotted a mini bike. There was a mini motorcycle backstage. He grabbed it and he starts riding around the stage, and I mean, all this stuff. Let's see, and there's so many more that I didn't get to mention. Sonny Boy Williamson, who I like to call my cousin because his mother was named Minnie Ford, and Lightning Hopkins from Texas, Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, more of the folk, in the folk circles, you know, Skip James, and Mississippi John Hurt, B.B. King from Indianola, obviously a big influence. And then, you know, the young white kids, the young English kids came in and saw that America really was kind of forgetting these guys from the 50s and reintroduced the blues to America, people like Eric Clapton and the Rolling Stones, and in the 80s, Stevie Ray Vaughan, of course. And then I wanted to mention some guys that are kind of doing it now, that I feel like they are representing the old blues. And there's plenty of blues guitar players, what I call rock blues, more of rock blues fusion, you know. But I wanted to mention these guys. A guy named John Tavius Willis. He was just in town last week, and I couldn't go see the show. It was down at Motor Pub. He is basically a guy that sits there and plays acoustic guitar and plays the old style blues. What I'm doing. A guy named Marquise Knox from St. Louis. He plays electric guitar, but these guys are in their early 20s. Well, Marquise just turned 28, but they're in their 20s and they're doing the blues thing. A guy named Christone Kingfish Ingram. He's probably one of the best electric players. Great big guy. But those are three that I can recommend if you Google those guys. That's what I would call the blues and done by young people today. We'll do one more short one then? Okay, we'll do one more and we'll call it a day. I wanted to do an example of 12-bar blues, and I've probably already done it, but the 12-bar blues is something you hear associated with blues music, and it's where you sing a line and then you repeat a line and then you answer the line, like in this song. This is an old Bobby Blue Bland song from 1957. It's called Further On Up the Road. So it goes, further on up the road, someone gonna about you like you couldn't be. And then he repeats that line. Further on up the road, someone gonna hurt you like you couldn't be. And then he answers the line. Further on up the road, just you wait and see. Further on up the road, someone gonna about you like you couldn't be. Further on up the road, someone gonna about you like you couldn't be. Further on up the road, just you wait and see. You got to be to spot you so that don't sang it is true. Got to be just Thank you very much.